History with Mr. D. America, a new hope. You know, here's the moment you all been waiting for, the answers to the timeline. You see, there's a few dates and years that I decided to pick here for you. 1773, 1776, 1781, 1783, 1787, 1796, and 1800. Why? Well, that's what this video is all about. Are you hearing bells too? You see, early American history was filled with important events that shaped the nation to this day. To review Chapter 10 and Chapter 9, fill out this timeline detailing the major events that took place over the course of these years. All right? Now, pictures need not to be a masterpiece, right? I just expect you to do your best to visually represent the ideas. Most important is to explain why these events are important, and hopefully I can fill in some of those blanks for you in this video. Check it out. The first year on your table, on your timeline, I should say, is 1773, and that would be the Boston Tea Party. So why did we choose this one? Well, it's an undeniable revolt against British mercantilism. If you remember that term, mercantilism is a system where you create and maintain wealth. And in the colonists' view, the British were doing this through their taxes. Many taxes. Many, many taxes. Colonists, after many repeals of those taxes, felt that the British tax on tea was still pretty self-serving for the British. So what happens? The Boston Tea Party. It's an open rebellion in the name of no taxation without representation. Ladies and gentlemen, step right up and commit an act of high treason punishable by death. It's true, though. You know, when this document, the Declaration of Independence, was signed in the year 1776, 56 people, knowing that they were committing high treason, signed the document anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, that's commitment. So what is the Declaration of Independence, right? Well, you know this, but it's a formal, open letter, a resignation that says, hey, King of England, no offense, but we feel like we can do this better. You see, from the colonists' perspective, after years of what they felt unfair laws and taxes, the colonists started thinking together and using common sense, Thomas Paine, and the thoughts of guys like Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, John Adams, among others, came to the conclusions that, you know what, maybe we can do this better. Perhaps a king on an island 3,000 miles away, never having set foot on this continent, never having interacted with the people of these colonies, has no clue what we are, what we look like, what we need, and what we want, and furthermore won't listen because they won't allow us a seat at the table to represent ourselves when it comes to taxes and laws. Perhaps the citizens thought to themselves, we can do this better. Now, timing is everything, right? They didn't write the Declaration right away. They waited 3 years after the Boston Tea Party and waited for a decisive statement at the Battle of Bunker Hill before we got out in front of ourselves. They had to make sure that we could prove ourselves in the field of battle, and the timing of which was July 4th, 1776. So when you blow up some fireworks and eat some hot dogs this year, remember, 56 people committed high treason for you and for me. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, is the year 1781, the Battle of Yorktown. This is where General Cornwallis of the British Army finally surrenders to George Washington and his white horse Nelson. So why is this important? Well, it's the last official major battle. There were some skirmishes afterwards, but this is where General Cornwallis officially surrenders to George Washington, though he appointed his subordinate to relinquish his sword as Cornwallis hid in shame. It is the end of major conflict in the American Revolution. Next on your list is the year 1783, and that is the Treaty of Paris. And I make sure that I tell you it's the year 1783 because there are many treaties of Paris. Oh, you don't believe me? Well, Oh, well, then allow me. There's actually a lot of treaties of Paris. There's the Treaty of Paris 1229, 1259, 1303, 1320, 1323, 1355, 1515, 1623, 1626, 1657, 1718, 1761, 1763, 1783, 1784, 1796, 1802, 3 in 1806, 1810, 1812, 1814, 1815, 1856, 1857, 1898, 1900, 1918, 1920, and 1951. Turns out a lot of things happen in Paris and a lot of treaties get signed there. It's nice to have a little bit of clarity there. Kudos, extra credit for the year 1806, having 3 treaties of Paris. By the way, if you don't believe me, Google it, look it up. Now, why is this Treaty of Paris important? Well, this was the official peace treaty between the United States and Great Britain. It took 2 years to negotiate. Yorktown was 1781. Our official peace treaty was 1783. This is important, though, because it sets the national boundaries of the United States from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. Also, it recognizes the United States as an independent nation. So, congratulations, us. Now that brings us to the year 1787. This is a big year in a lot of ways, right? So, after we win the Revolutionary War, after we negotiate a peace treaty, and we declare independence, not in that order, we kind of have this realization that we are now starting this grand experiment at self-government. And guess what? We ain't perfect. We didn't get it right. In fact, our first attempt at self-government was the Articles of Confederation. It was an abject failure, right? It was well-intentioned, but it had no teeth, right? The federal government had 0 power, like no taxing power, had to have unanimous consent on everything. It just wasn't possible. Try to think now of getting all 50 states to agree on anything, or better, try to get all 535 members of Congress to agree on one concept. Ain't happening, right? So we had a do-over. And that do-over is probably the greatest do-over of all time, the United States Constitution. It sets up the federal system of government, the sharing of power between the states and the central government. It sets up a system of checks and balances. It also establishes our 3 branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. But most importantly, in the year 1787, not only is the Constitution ratified, but we elect our first president, George Washington. All right? And he was a great choice for the first president. And he is sworn in the year 1787. The grand experiment begins. The year 1796. A lot of important things happening this year. Number 1, George Washington decides to peace out. I'm done after 2 terms. Deuces. But also, most importantly, we have peaceful transfer of power, part 1. You see, the election of 1796 was between 2 esteemed political pundits. And 2 political parties, by the way. Political parties that, by the way, George Washington warned against when he gave his farewell address, as you remember. He warned us against 4 things: pay off the national debt, no political parties, no permanent foreign alliances, and the people are the true leaders of the nation, among others, right? So political parties formed anyways, and it began to divide the country. He was right, and they still continue to divide the country. People will identify with party first rather than country, and that's problematic in a lot of different ways, but that's for another time. Peaceful transition of power is the most important thing I want to focus on. John Adams wins the election, and in doing so, for the first time, one president peacefully leaves office and retires quietly, steps aside willingly, and transfers power to the next president. This is a very important thing, because when you think about it, in all of world history, when one person loses power and another gains that same position, it usually doesn't end well. Lots of bells today. It either ends in an overthrow, or an assassination, or a coup, or an imprisonment, but very rarely, especially here in the United States, quite frequently, the peaceful transfer of power exists. It's probably one of the most important traditions to this day. Last but not least on your timeline is the year 1800. That's right, the dramatic conclusion. This, my friends, is peaceful transfer of power, part 2, and possibly more important than 1796. Why? Well, those doggone political parties got in the way again. And if you think American politics are dirty now, literally go back and look at what was said in the election of 1800 between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. It'd make your mama blush. Well, maybe not, but I'll tell you what, it was slanderous. It was mean. It was personal. It was ugly, right? And this was a contested election. It wasn't just between Jefferson and Adams. There was Burr, there was Pinckney, all right? Hamilton was involved, and Hamilton got killed. Spoiler alert. A lot of nastiness going on. So when people tell you that American politics, this is some new thing where it's dirty and slanderous and all, it's nothing new. It doesn't mean that it's right, but it's literally not new. Go back and check that out. We will if you're in my class. But the most important thing, I think, to look at here is that Thomas Jefferson wins the election of 1800. Now, George Washington sets a precedent by leaving after 2 terms, right? There's no law in place yet, not until FDR, but that's another day. Washington leaves after 2 terms, and every president up until Franklin Delano Roosevelt follows that tradition and leaves after 2 terms. Adams wants to get reelected to 4 more years, right? Jefferson gets in the way. And it was close, it was contested, but Adams clearly was not the winner, electoral vote-wise. So when the election was finally decided, although Adams wanted very desperately to hang on to the presidency, he leaves peacefully, and the peaceful transfer of power continues. He accepts the results of the election, and he moves on. Things weren't good between him and Jefferson for a long time, but later on, they were able to kind of reconnect, and there's a lot of really nice letters between the two. The 2 men actually became really close, dear friends. And look up a special event on the 50th anniversary between those 2 guys. It's a little grim, but interesting nonetheless. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for listening, and as I promised, wait till the end. My official statement on political parties now. Thank you, Internet Cat. Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, History with Mr. D.